The United States President Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1941 described the ILO tripartite governance as a wild dream. In his words, who had ever heard of governments getting together to raise standards of labor on an international plane? Wilder still was the idea that the people themselves who were directly affected, that is, the workers and the employers of the various countries, should have a hand with government in determining these labor standards. End of quote. Well, this wild dream has literally transformed the lives of billions of people for the better and changed the course of history. It is the history behind that wild dream that I will be bringing you today on your program Policy on Track. At the International Labour Conference in Geneva, Switzerland in June this year, the centenary of ILO was celebrated. More importantly, 100 years of fighting for social justice in a more peaceful world. What does the ILO owe its longevity? Its 100 years of uninterrupted activity too. Coming from the ruins of the First World War, in response to the desperation and frustration of millions of workers. The strength of the ILO is its unique tripartite governance structure, that is, the worker, employer, and government. Nowhere else in the world do the silos between the principal actors in the world of work break down and work together towards a better future. Still to come on today's discourse is the call by businesses on government to put a check on regulatory bodies meant to facilitate business growth, who have now constituted themselves as clogs in the wheel of the ease of doing business. Employers in the private sector say this move, if not checked, will only push the nation into the abyss of underdevelopment. Today's edition promises to be explosive. My name is Mohogbone Wilkie, your host, and you are welcome. Over these 100 years, the International Labour Organization has changed from being a wild dream to a tangible reality, a unique model of tripartite partnership that has facilitated social dialogue between government, employers, and workers. It has also handed down to the world a vast body of work, including hundreds of conventions, policies, and recommendations which have inspired labor laws and institutions that promote safe conditions, decent treatment, freedom of association, and non-discrimination, among many rights. The three fundamental principles of the ILO expressed in the 1944 Declaration of Philadelphia are more valid now than ever, which are: labor is not a commodity, freedom of expression and association, which are essential to sustained progress. The third one being that poverty anywhere constitutes danger to prosperity everywhere.
The objective which the ILO was established to pursue is social contract for peace and social justice. Coming from the background of the 1917 Russian Revolution, which pushed fear of unrest to the top of many governments' list of worries, and the First World War, which upended the social fabric of many developed economies. Those drafting the ILO's constitution at the 1919 Versailles Peace Conference realized that radical problems required radical solutions. Their answer was a tripartite structure with three groups of equal voice, that is, employers, workers, and governments. These will shape the new organization's mandate and work. This unique tripartite system continues to define the special nature and strength of the ILO. Albert Thomas was the first ILO Director General between 1919 to 1932. He created, out of a little group of officials, 500 participants, out of which 22 were women, an institution with global reach. In its first year, the ILO's 40 founding member states adopted 9 conventions, that is, legally binding international labor standards, and 10 recommendations which quickly began to change the world of work. Convention number 1 established the principles of the 8-hour day and 48-hour week at a time when the normal working week was around 60 hours. Other conventions in this first batch covered unemployment, maternity protection, night work, minimum working age, and safety and health. The effect of these work made the ILO's reputation resonate internationally beyond the offices of policymakers. Before the Second World War, the ILO adopted international instruments improving conditions for dockers, migrant workers, male and female minors, and began regulating work issues such as sickness, injury, and old age insurances, compensation for accidents, wage fixing, paid holidays, and employment agencies. In May 1944, member states adopted the Declaration of Philadelphia. These expanded the ILO's mandate to encompass promoting equitable growth and linking social policies to human rights, spelling out the principles that labor is not a commodity and that poverty anywhere constitutes a danger to prosperity everywhere. This helped pave way for Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted years later by the UN General Assembly.
The uncertainties and insecurities of our time instead underline just how fundamental the achievement of social justice is to stability and to peace, and how vital access to decent work is to the advancement of human well-being. But the fact is that the future of work will be the result of our decisions, our choices, our capacity to follow up on them, our willingness to cooperate together and to make the future of work the one that we want. And that is a future of work which assures the continuity of the 100-year-old vision of the founders of the International Labour Organization and the aspirations of the citizens of the future through the constant advancement of decent work, of social justice, and of peace.
The founders of the ILO pioneered the creation of the only tripartite organization in the multilateral system, bringing together representatives of governments, employers, and workers. This is the great strength of the ILO. The International Organization of Employers, representing over 50 million companies throughout the globe, says the IOE share in the ILO's belief that a skilled workforce is the backbone of success, not only of business, but of society as a whole.
We are committed to promoting social dialogue to guarantee sustainable economic growth, concomitant stability, and ensure lasting peace. We firmly hold that freedom of association is a prerequisite for social peace for workers and employers alike. I unequivocally reaffirm our profound and long-standing commitment and gratitude to the ILO and to the objective to ensure social justice based on access to equal opportunities, productive employment, and decent work for all.
100 years after its creation, the mission of the ILO remains unchanged. Its mission is to protect the rights of all workers around the world and guarantee them sufficient social protection and to improve the access of women and men to decent and productive work, carried out in conditions of safety and respect for human dignity.
In terms of adopting conventions and enforcing the provisions of the convention, ILO has made a tremendous contribution, and also Sri Lanka has been a beneficiary of a lot of technical assistance, technical support there are certain institutions and certain legislation. If ILO was not there, these things wouldn't have been a reality or wouldn't have happened.
Right from the time we were in the colonies and then we became independent and then we started, creating jobs for our own. If it weren't for the ILO's International Convention, maybe the rights that we're enjoying as workers would not have been what it is. So in a way, we have to be very grateful for the fact that year on year, ILO has established conventions, and countries that have fallen foul to the conventions have been brought before it. So by and large, we have made a good progress.
A lot has been achieved, but there's still room for more achievement. For instance, now we are talking about violence and harassment in the place of work, the way people of different genders are treated in these places of work without guidance from ILO. Each country would be doing things haphazardly, and that would cause confusion in the place of work.
The historic 2 weeks conference to celebrate the 100 years of ILO was honored by more than 30 heads of states and governments. They expressed support for the ILO's social justice mandates and called for global action for a just future of work.
Today, the ILO can look back with pride at what it has achieved through a century of tireless work with employers, trade unions and governments. Safer workplaces, fairer conditions, better pay. It has been 100 years of steady progress. 100 years that have built the foundation on which we stand today as we gather in Geneva to look to the future of work and to ensure that future works for us all.
I'm equally conscious that the last 100 years has seen greater change for ordinary people than at any other time in the history of mankind. And if we accept those two statements then, Madam Chair, Director General, then we begin to understand the critical nature of the work which this organization continues to do on behalf of those without voice and those without presence.
For the ILO to continue with its valuable work, we need to reaffirm our commitment also to multilateralism. Although the ILO retains its unique character within the UN system, as the only organization that has governments, business and trade unions as equal partners, the global multilateral framework remains very fragile at the moment. The prospect of a looming trade war and other disagreements seem to signal greater global tension and polarization.
100 years after, with a membership strength of 187 countries, as the ILO strives to realize our objectives in the world of work that is being transformed by the combined impact of technology, climate change, globalization, it will do well to see that rhetoric must match action.
The Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, PEBEC, was set up in 2016 to remove bureaucratic constraints to doing businesses in Nigeria and make the country a progressively easier place to start and grow business. 3 years after, it is arguable if it is achieving its mandate. My focus today is not much on PEBEC, but on actions of some regulatory agencies. Activities of these regulatory agencies are a sharp contrast to the ease of doing business mantra of this government. Reports indicate these regulatory agencies have turned themselves into income-generating bodies with penchant for sanctions on businesses without following due process.
The real sector of the economy remains the foundation on which true and sustainable growth and development is built. In 2018, the sector experienced its fair share of fortune and misfortune, especially as it relates to trade liberalization, backward integration, multiple and sometimes burdensome taxation, poor access to funding, and regulatory gangsterism. Though employers recognize the existence of the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, PEBEC, that has the mandate to remove bureaucratic constraints to doing business, they say contradictions between the mandates of PEBEC and some regulatory bodies are worrisome. In business-friendly climes, regulators are meant to facilitate business growth with consequential positive effects on employment generalization, security, poverty alleviation, and higher GDP growth rates. However, the employers say in Nigeria, some of the regulators have turned themselves into income-generating entities, not necessarily always for government coffers.
The message the presidency is sending across to the world is that this environment is friendly to business. To register it, not only to register it, but to run your business and make money, go with your money, give us what belongs to us. Now, this policy is supposed to be implemented by these various agencies, both at federal and state level. Sadly, the way these agencies go about it, they totally ignore the federal government's trust. They just believe that this is private sector, they have so much money, what do? Every moment, every day that we are short of money, we must find something that we want to go and raise money for. And so they keep harassing businesses, contradicting exactly the import of what the federal government is trying to do, which therefore first discourages people from coming around because they can find better environment, a more friendly environment. What do? When they have a choice between us and those environments, they would rather prefer to go to those environments. And those of us who are already in the system makes it a little bit more difficult for us. And then you turn the whole thing into all kinds of, call it levies or taxes, which increases the cost of doing business. How many of us can easily pass this increased cost to consumers? Consumers are already pauperized. They say they don't have money. And then you are telling those of us who are producing for these consumers to increase the cost of our business. When we increase the cost, can we pass it down? Most cases we cannot. When we don't pass it down, what do? We absorb it. It reduces margin. We cannot plow back. It has a multiplier effect on the business as a whole.
As if wondering aloud, Victor Aburujolo says perhaps some government agencies derive pleasure when businesses are shut down or how many businesses are sanctioned.
They don't make contact before they come down with sanctions. I have always said this. Their role is to facilitate business and help us to create wealth for the country. But they see more their authority than their responsibility. And they want to tell us that they are there and they can deal with us whichever way they want. This has been a problem. And I don't know what the government will do, but they need a reorientation. Let them first see their responsibilities before their powers.
For labor, this trend will only increase the rate of unemployment, escalate poverty, insecurity level, and reduce the flow of foreign direct investments and push the nation into the abyss of underemployment.
The role of the agencies is to implement government policies and to monitor companies. But since they have turned themselves to income generators, it's going to increase the cost of production. And as a result of that, employers are forced to declare redundancy because everybody knows the primary objective of investing in any business is to maximize profitability. Now when we have a lot of agencies, multiple taxation, so it tends to increase the cost of production. And when cost of production has increased, the cost of business, doing business too has increased, and that will affect the employees. So the employers will be forced to reduce their workforce.
We feel that they are not protecting the ordinary people as they should do. They seem not to have a focus on what their mandate truly is. And the fact remains that when regulatory agencies don't do their work properly, it will affect the society, starting from the working people to the larger society. So the regulatory agencies themselves should know the important role they play, because their creation means that they should make sure there's a balance, both in the output of those they regulate and the society. But if they, by any reason whatsoever, secure their supervisory role towards one part, of course it will jeopardize the progress of the companies. And once progress of companies are jeopardized, the workers in that company will be ultimately affected.
The 2018 release ranking of the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business report shows that Nigeria had dropped from its initial 145th position by a point to 146th among the 190 economies assessed. The success of a regulatory agency should not be measured by how much income it generates or how many organizations it is able to sanction, but how many business it facilitates and supports to succeed.
Let me reiterate the last line from that report. The success of a regulatory agency should not be measured by how much income it generates or how many organizations it is able to sanction, but how many business it facilitates and supports to succeed. Thank you for allowing me into your space at this time. I am Ogbone Wilkie. Bye-bye.